Memphis Depay, recharged and ready to represent the biggest club in the world, he said on Twitter. Here he is in his first training session with Barcelona. Sid Lowe is joining us now to talk a little bit more about his situation. Sid, let me get this straight. So he signed with the club, but he can't be registered. How does that work?
Well, I'll try, Kay, and make this as simple as possible. And then, of course, if you like, we can go through some of the details bit by bit. But let's start with the very basics. The basics are that Spanish football clubs, as imposed by La Liga, have a salary cap. That salary cap, of course, covers not just the salaries, but all the money spent on the first team squad. Now, the difference between those salary caps and, for example, some of the rules that are applied by UEFA for financial fair play is that those salary caps are not about punishing teams after the event. They're about imposing them in advance. In other words, a club like Barcelona will be set a limit. And that limit will be, this is the amount of budget you have for your first team squad, and you are not allowed to go over it. In other words, if you have a limit of around about 200 million euros, which it looks like Barcelona's limit will be, and you have already got 200 million euros worth of players in that budget in terms of what you're paying them in salaries, in terms of what repayments need to be made for player transfers and so on, you cannot add anyone to that squad. Barcelona are currently over budget. It's this simple. They're over budget, so those players cannot be added to the squad. Now, the good news for Barcelona is that there's about a month until the season starts. They have about a month to sort this out, and that means, of course, selling players, generating money, taking salary off their books, and being able to fit all of this into place. The bad news is that while they have a month, they have a huge amount of work to do to be able to get those players into the squad the way that they want and to be able to get those players registered.
So there's players that need to be offloaded, and one of the big names there, and especially in terms of salary, is Antoine Griezmann. We know this. Apparently there's been a latest turn, according to the Spanish press, that the pact he had with Atleti has broken down. So what's the latest situation there?
Well, look, in a way, that's quite simple, which is that Barcelona are now in a position, and forgive me for putting this in such blunt terms, where Barcelona basically have to listen to any offer for any players, because they desperately need to generate that money and they desperately need to reduce the demands of their wage structure. Now, of course, one way of doing that in particular is to get rid of players who are on big wages, and that's the case of Antoine Griezmann. There's also over 70 million euros worth of amortisations that have to be put into their budget for next year with Griezmann. So getting rid of him would make a huge impact in terms of trying to balance the budget and trying to get all of those players registered in time. So that means that Barcelona are open to all sorts of scenarios and all sorts of propositions. One of those propositions came from Atletico Madrid, which was, well, how about we organise this, that we effectively have a swap deal between Saul and Antoine Griezmann, although the league doesn't like swap deals, so they would probably have been two different operations, and we try and work this out. The problem with that is very simple. You have two players. And you have two players who have different demands in terms of wages, in terms of what they expect to get paid, in terms of what kind of role they expect to the clubs, and in terms of whether or not they're going to accept this kind of deal. And so the two deals are effectively dependent upon each other. There's another problem here, which is Barcelona looked at this and thought, well, this is a way of reducing the wage demands on us by having someone else pay for Antoine Griezmann's wages. Atletico Madrid looked at this and thought, this is fantastic. This is a way of getting Griezmann virtually for free, and you know what, if we're really lucky, as was happened with Luis Suarez last year, we may well be able to be in a situation in which Barcelona even cover some of the wages of this player. Now, of course, what happened, very simply, is that all these pieces didn't fit together, and that deal is very difficult to do.
And so now the reports are stating that Barcelona, and some of them are saying they're demanding money for him as well, are shopping him around to Premier League clubs too. But we know that they have very high wages. Can you see him being the right fit at a Premier League club? And obviously we're talking only about a few who could afford him.
Well, the first thing is that all those clubs that you may be talking about, they also know with certainty that Barcelona are desperate. And so they are in a negotiating position where they come to the table knowing that Barcelona needs you to make this transaction. They need to make it happen. And because when you get desperate and you need something to happen, you become a little irresponsible with the transaction. And so you're willing to take certain losses. You're willing to make certain alleviation or certain concessions in the deal because, guess what? You need it to happen. That desperation that Barcelona has, any team that is interested in Antoine Griezmann would be smart to say, okay, Barcelona, we're not going to meet you halfway. you're going to come 3/4 of the way over here, and then at that point we'll start talking. And when we start talking, we're going to be in the position of power. So we're going to do a deal that benefits us, not necessarily a deal that benefits you.
And then obviously you've got teams like Manchester City who are in the window for players like Harry Kane. If that's not to work, would Antoine Griezmann be a good fit there, given the fact they want a goal scorer?
Well, as far as I can remember, Antoine Griezmann scores quite a lot of goals when he's given the opportunity. Antoine Griezmann will fit in any team across the planet. He's that good. He absolutely 100% would fit in at City. You know, City have been playing pretty much the whole of last season without a so-called centre-forward. He absolutely fits the bill as if you want a centre-forward or if you want somebody coming off. Perfect. Chelsea, he would fit in at Chelsea. Again, a team that doesn't or hasn't, certainly under Tuchel, played with what you would call a centre-forward, but they create lots of chances. Problem is, they don't have anybody to take them. Guess what? Antoine Griezmann would be perfect at Chelsea as well. So, listen, he could fit in anywhere, but those two in particular.
You know the only team that he doesn't fit in quite well? Barcelona.
Yeah.
And the reason is Lionel Messi is still there and will be there. And so that free role that we've spoken about time and time again is simply not available. And so therefore, I think it would be in the best interest, not only of Barcelona, but certainly of Antoine Griezmann to say, you know, this is not what I thought I was getting myself into, and how about we find a way out? This may just be the way out that he requires.
So, Sid, if it's not Barcelona and it's not Atleti, is it most likely going to be a Premier League club then?
Well, look, both Steve and Ali have absolutely nailed this. This is the scenario we're in. Time is running out, options are limited, and clubs know that Barcelona are in trouble. And there's one thing worse than being in difficulty financially, and that's everybody knowing you're in difficulty financially, because your way out is sales. Your way out is clubs coming and paying money for your players. But those clubs, as Ali's rightly laid out, don't necessarily want to pay that money because they know that you need it. So they will wait until the last possible minute. As you say, so in which case, what is the scenario for Antoine Griezmann and for Barcelona? Well, the scenario is Premier League clubs, because they're the ones that have the money, they're the ones that could assimilate his wages, they're the ones that could find a place for him. And I'm completely with Stevie on this, by the way. I mean, I know that his time at Barcelona has been difficult, but Antoine Griezmann is a fantastic footballer, and I'm sure there will be clubs out there thinking, this is brilliant. We've got a club that desperately needs to sell, and they desperately need to sell a player who we think is brilliant, and we could well get him at a price that in time will prove to be a bargain.
Meanwhile, Messi's on holiday and living it up in Miami, and that's not going by quietly for him. What's the timeline on his situation? How does it differ with what we're seeing with Memphis Depay, with this signing and registering? How does it differ?
Well, in truth, it doesn't really differ at all, because Barcelona's situation is that the league have the requirement for when the season starts to register the players within the salary limits. And so that cut-off point, which I must confess I'm not sure exactly the date, but it's just before the season starts, that cut-off point is the same for all of them. Now, obviously, Barcelona have a series of priorities, and they will look at their squad and say, well, if we're put in a position where we are told you can't register in terms of salary, say for argument's sake, and I am genuinely just inventing this figure, but say for argument's sake, La Liga says you can't register 20 million euros worth of players in terms of salaries. Barcelona will look at their salaries and think, okay, well, I'll lose this guy who makes 10 and these two guys who make 5, and that's 20 million's gone off the book, and then we'll worry about what the La Liga imposes on us, and they won't leave out Messi, and they won't leave out Memphis Depay. But of course, the reason why this is a blockage on Messi's deal being confirmed right now is because neither Messi nor Barcelona can afford to be in a position like that. And so they want to wait until they're absolutely sure that there are no major obstacles in their way still.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week, subscribe to ESPN+.